this on this Google Meet for my presentation, um, not Talamdu, so body literacy and the prenatal experience. I'm going to just hop right into it to make best use of our time together. So a little bit about me, just so that y'all know who it is that you're speaking, that's going to be speaking to all of you. My name is Carmen Mojica. I am a certified professional midwife and also a licensed midwife. I identify as a Black Dominican woman. I am first generation, born and raised in the Bronx. And my healing journey to get to this point, to even be able to give this presentation and talk about what I'm going to speak to you about, comes from my healing journey beginning in college. And in college, I was able to really explore my body, my reproductive health, and my well being. I had a lot of questions growing up about my body, and I also experienced a lot of irregular periods. And so, as soon as I was able to get those questions answered, a majority of my knowledge and my research is self-study. Um, and that really began in like going to red tents in college, and I'm talking about like early 2000s. So I don't even know if they have red tents anymore on college campuses, and like the feminist majority like leadership alliance that was on campus, and that continued, and it blocked me wanting to be able to help other people, particularly Black and Latina and Indigenous women, answer questions about their body, because I realized as I was learning that there were other people like me who had had similar experiences and lived experiences living in racialized bodies that didn't have this information available to them. And in healing the relationship to my body, there was also a lot of healing my relationship to my mental health and addressing my mental health things that have been long happening, if you will, um, from a young age and through the majority of my life. And so I first heard about midwifery in college. I was a television and radio and communications major, and I was also a Black Studies major. And so in one of my Black Studies classes is where I heard about midwifery, and that reminded me that I had an interest in being a doctor, but midwifery seemed to be a more holistic and truer way for me to access that. So first I wanted to be a holistic health counselor, and then that shifted into wanting to be a doula, because in the material that I had I had gotten to study to be a holistic health counselor, they mentioned doulas. And then after I went to my first birth as a doula is when I realized like all of the knowledge that I was learning and amassing, and my ability to hold space for pregnant individuals and pregnant women, I couldn't be my full self as a doula, and that I was on the wrong side of the bed. And so I was a little afraid to be a midwife because of the responsibility that came with it. But the universe had a way of showing me that I was supposed to be a midwife. So I went and I studied at Maternidad La Luz, which is a birth center in El Paso, Texas. And the reason that I decided to go that route is because I didn't want to go into the hospital system. I I didn't feel like I could um, participate in the hospital system, in the hospital medicalized way of giving birth. Um, During that time, I was very much connected to understanding that midwifery wasn't always in the hospital. And even though I tried to be a nurse midwife, I actually was shown very quickly in the nurse midwifery program that I was briefly in that I had made the right decision spirit wise. What I loved about my program is that I got to um it was as close to the apprenticeship model of midwifery as I could. The history of midwifery, most of it is apprenticeship, not actually going to like an actual brick and mortar school, but midwives teaching other midwives how to be midwives by having them as assistants, by having them come into the birth space at young ages a lot of the time, um, and passing the trade on that way. And so that's why one of the reasons I chose to go to Maternidad La Luz. I also got to serve 99% of the women that I helped and I was learning while I was learning to be a midwife were women from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, because the birth center is on the border of Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. And so this clinic had a huge volume of Mexican women giving birth there. And so I wanted to learn how to be able to attend birth in Spanish. And so that was perfect for me. I did incur a lot of trauma having to watch people navigate the political realities of living on the border and empathizing deeply with people that were coming across the border, and yet and still it was one of the best experiences of my life. I I actually missed my graduation from midwifery school because I was busy doing something else in the world, and I had been part of like a citizen journalism program, and it just so happened that some of the program was happening with my graduation. The reason I bring up graduation is because I feel like I graduated as a midwife when I became a mother. That's when I was able to fully embody midwifery through having an embodied experience, which I'm going to talk about embodiment more later on in this lecture. Becoming a mother gave me more insight, made me be able to better explain and empathize with people who are pregnant. And it also solved a conundrum that I was in when I was in midwifery school. I noticed that I was really good and I was able to be present during the birth, but I felt very awkward and I felt very disconnected from the postpartum as a midwifery student. And becoming a mother gave me the experience of going through the postpartum and further than that, really understand the needs in the postpartum period. And it's been basically like my special interest and my obsession since I became a mother, because we are postpartum for the rest of our lives. We're after birth after we give birth. There is no reality after someone becomes a parent and becomes a mother where you are pre-pregnancy or back to who you were. You are irrevocably changed by pregnancy. So I've always been an activist. I was politically activated when I was 14 years old, and I became more interested in reproductive justice and birth justice when I became a doula. So um, my direct action against empire and everything that we understand about empire just translated itself to being more fully centered in the reproductive rights and the reproductive justice that Black and Brown women have been fighting for centuries to reclaim autonomy over their body. And so, with all that said, my expertise is in midwifery and the Afro Latina identity, which was a big part of my healing journey and healing from racial discrimination and racism in Latinidad and how that impacted my mental health. Um, I didn't have a full appreciation for my blackness growing up as a Dominican woman because of the inherent racism that is embedded in the Dominican culture and also throughout Latino America and South America. And so I have a lot of experience, lived experience and research experience from that, health and wellness, and also disparities in maternal health care for Black and Latina women. So enough about me. I know that there was a workshop earlier about body literacy and what it is. So I'm not gonna bore you with the details of it, but I did want to like ground the rest of my presentation in what is body literacy, just to reiterate it for all of you. From the research by Laura Werschel and all her folks, it's basically the way that I have interpreted body literacy. I take the word literacy as a writer and I'm like, how do you become literate in the body? How do you learn to read the body, right? And learning to read the body is acquired by learning how to observe, chart, and interpret our menstrual cycle events. This helps us to understand how our sexual, reproductive, and general health and well-being are connected to our menstrual cycles. Our menstrual cycles for me at least, and I'm sure other professionals in fertility awareness and in reproductive health would agree that our menstrual cycles are probably the most important marker of wellness because of how much it controls. It doesn't just control our bleeding and the follicular phase and ovulatory phase. It has a huge impact on our mental health. It has a huge impact on our lifespan health. It can be like your experiences in your menstrual cycle and in your so-called childbearing years have a huge impact and implications on what your experiences are going to be when you're pregnant, when you're postpartum, and when you're perimenopausal and menopausal. And we have lost in this world the care and attention and the knowledge that we need to be healthy throughout our menstrual cycle, which is why so many of us are initiated into pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause without the guidance that we need, without having the wise elders that are able to transmit this information. Because like something that I've discovered really quickly was, especially with pregnancy, is like no matter how many times people have been pregnant on this planet, which has been arguably for thousands and thousands of years, people who are for their first time being pregnant in the literature we call folks prima gravida, so the first time you're pregnant, are always shocked, are always like super brand new to it. And I always thought that that was interesting. I'm like, we've been pregnant before as people. Like, why don't we know stuff, right? Why don't we know what we don't? Well, why don't we know this? We've been around pregnant people. Why don't we know? And I think I believe, and I've seen that a lot of it is this disassociation from our bodies and the inability to like be fully in our bodies. And so I have embodied fertility awareness as a lifestyle. My fertility awareness journey actually began during an online conference in 2020, probably in the pandemic. And it just so happened that the host of the symposium gave a presentation on fertility awareness, and that began my relationship with Nicole. And that relationship, and then all of the other people that I met, all the other women that I met through opening myself up to fertility awareness, irrevocably has changed my life over the last 5 6 years at this point, since 2020. And I wouldn't say that it was my first introduction into knowledge of the menstrual cycle and learning about my body, because I had already been to midwifery school before I went to that symposium. I had already gained a lot of deep knowledge about my body, but it wasn't until I had someone who could speak to me one-on-one, and other folks that I could speak to about their experiences, and that we could share research and nerd out and talk about like these intimate details that I couldn't have with these conversations I couldn't have with my gynecologists, because they were fully unaware and completely misinformed about the body, that I was able to really embody it as a lifestyle. Um, I have always been sensitive to my bodily sensations and the changes in them, but to be able to name them, to be able to chart them, to be able to talk to someone else candidly without shame, made it so that now in my life it is at the top of my mind. It is something I think about all the time, even when I'm not thinking about it. I have such an awareness in my body of my womb, my uterus, my hormones, that is unmatched. And it really speaks to what I was talking about before, about this transmitted knowledge, that these links that have been broken primarily by patriarchy and colonialism, especially for Black and brown women, of like, this is how we used to learn, by having conversations with other women and other female bodied individuals about our bodies. And so I don't know if folks have come across this term already in the symposium, but I am going to be talking a lot about what is called interoception, which is the interpretation of our internal signals. And then so interoception has four different pieces to it. And I took a deep dive into the research getting ready for this lecture. So there's interoceptive accuracy or sensitivity, which is how accurate we are at detecting and interpreting our signals when we compare it to objective measures. Those objective measures being temperatures, symptoms that you can actually visually see and feel in your hand and in your body. How sensitive are we and how accurate are we to these objective markers? Then there's interceptive sensibility, which is our subjective experience of it. So there's the objective data and numbers that we collect to be able to know what's happening on charts and on thermometers. And then there's how sensible are we to it? Like, what is our own individual personalized experience of our internal signals and how we interpret them? And this is important because I had this conversation with a really dear friend of mine, a midwife, where like it is very like, I don't want to say Eurocentric or like ethnocentric, but for many people who are biologists or like science folks, if someone came up to you and told you from another culture that they believe that they got pregnant because there was a star in the sky that shone their light down on them when they were pregnant, and that the baby came to them through that star beam, there would be a part of our brain that would be like, if you're scientific minded and that's all, you would be like, no, that's not how it happened. It was the sperm and the egg and the ovulation, right? But for that person and from that culture, that is their origin story, and that is how they orient to the world. So I share that because our subjective experience has a big impact on how we interpret those internal signals. And sometimes we can feel like they're negated by the scientific community if we tell them, I don't think that that's what happened. I think that this is what happened. And then there's interconceptive awareness. So you have the accuracy, you have how sensible you are to it, and then how aware you are of your own awareness, which is a meta. Like, how aware are you of how aware you are, right? And then we just go down the rabbit hole. And so as you gain deeper interconceptive um, awareness and all of these different fragments that I'm talking about, you're able to ground your decisions about your body in embodied knowledge, not just intellectual knowledge, but really like what is your, like, how do you live that knowledge? And I'm talking about this because pregnancy and postpartum is the most like the most, I don't want to say riveting, like what are two of the biggest events in our lifespan, and they pull you into the body for better or for worse, regardless of how much your intellect may be rejecting it. So I feel, and I have lived, and I know that this is true for folks that are deep in fertility awareness and body literacy work, that this is fertile ground for deep transformative healing work, because the body is where we live. We are encouraged not to live in the body, and we're encouraged to be intellectual. And that is a huge effect of living in a patriarchal society that separates us from the earth and separates us from the body. But in living in the body and being in the body, you also have to awaken to what are the stories and the memories that are stored in the body. And a lot of them are stored in our reproductive system. So our pregnancy and perinatal health involve huge dramatic physical and physiological changes that affect how we feel about our bodies. And this is, feel, is extremely important because we are arriving to pregnancy the way that we live. So if you have um, any type of history of like eating disorders, trauma, or anything to that effect, that amplifies how we feel about the sensations in our, we can be extremely dissatisfied, we can be joyful, and I think that's why I don't ever tell people this should be the happiest time in your life when you're pregnant, because it might not be. Like, there are so many social, psychosocial, like bodily physiological things that may make pregnancy and traversing it very complicated. And how you feel and your satisfaction to your body, your relationship to your body, especially when you're pregnant, is linked to how well we attach to the baby and the infant, and also maternal mental health. Um, in being able to be fully embodied in pregnancy, and in the postpartum, we're also able to detect um, growing crises and emergencies. Um, I believe, to bring a little bit of spirituality in it, is the more embodied and in the body one is when they're pregnant, the more they're able to tap into their intuition. And as someone who works outside of the hospital setting and is deeply connected to spirit, I often rely on the pregnant individual's intuitions for information. I don't just gather data on the vital signs and like what I'm palpating when I'm touching the person's belly and like where the baby is, but also like I try my best to try to amplify their intuition and listen to someone, even if they can't pinpoint what is happening. When someone tells me I don't feel right or if there's something wrong, I listen to that, because in negating that and reducing it to like, well, the data is not telling me anything, I can miss something really, really important. It's what I often say. So there are like certain crises such as preeclampsia, which is a metabolic dysfunction that involves the liver and the circulation. One of the things that I say and some of my colleagues say is like, if you just feel like something is off, get checked. The worst thing that could happen is that you go to the doctor and they tell you everything is fine, right? Actually, that's best case scenario. I wouldn't even say that that's the worst thing. The worst thing that could happen is that you brush off that feeling and then it ends up being an emergency. Um, Another thing about developing body literacy before or actually during pregnancy, for some folks that might not come until they're pregnant, it then also amplifies the trust that you have in your body to be able to give birth. Um, and trusting ourselves and trusting our bodies comes as a foreign concept to many because we are taught to distrust our bodies. Um, but it is a huge and important factor in being able to transition into parenthood and how we perceive the postpartum body. So many of us, or at least myself, we are influenced by snapback culture, the culture of you should be back to normal and back in your body, right? Um, and back to like your functional self, your non-pregnant self, as soon as possible. And it causes a lot of strife because then there's a gap between the ideal that we see, like, for example, the most recent postpartum person that's in the news, or at least is famous, is Cardi B. That woman got out of her bed not even 6 weeks after she gave birth to that baby, and she was performing, right? I was aghast, to be very, very honest with you, that I knew she had given birth, and then she was like back into like these slim fitting clothing and like performing on stage, because for all of the support that she could have, nothing erases what your body is physically doing in the 2 to 3 weeks after you give birth. And I just pray for her that she's been held, and that that she had like medical professionals and family and friends giving her ample rest after she, popped out and did whatever she needs to do. But for us lay people, we have to deal with like the fact that like our core doesn't go back immediately to the way that it is, and our core, our abdominal muscles, and our uteruses not being back in the pelvis, that throws off your center of gravity, that throws off your digestion, your postpartum digestion. I wish I could teach y'all a whole entire class about postpartum physiology. That I just gave that lecture on Thursday, actually, to my postpartum class about the deep changes that happen. And so as we're able to trust our bodies, it doesn't eliminate the discomfort in being in a postpartum body, because I believe that discomfort is part of the journey. It's part of like feeling the discomfort and being embodied and being not disassociated. But through that discomfort, I have come to an empathy and a compassion with the body, a patience with the body. because I learned that patience from becoming literate with trying to bring an irregular cycle into regularity, right? So in bringing my body from not pregnant to pregnant and then postpartum, I have been like, all right, this is just part of my healing process, and this is also like how much I'm struggling with healing as a reflection of how society is giving me the space to heal. um I want to say, and I want to speak about trauma and race and class, and how our information that we have available to us impacts how our relationship is to the pregnant body and the postpartum body. I mentioned and I touched on it a little bit, but unfortunately, many of us are traumatized. And female bodied individuals and women, we carry the brunt of trauma in this world alongside children. That trauma, unfortunately, is concentrated to our bodies, and especially our vulvas, our vaginas, and then by extension, our reproductive systems. Spiritually, many of us put and stuff and our trauma in our hips. And so to ask someone who has survived trauma to focus on their hips, to focus on their sacral chakra, for those of us who practice yoga, can be like climbing to the top of Mount Everest, to be quite honest, you know. And so I meet whoever's in front of me where they're at, because I can't expect someone who has been traumatized and violated to trust their bodies, especially in the experience that some people who are sexually assaulted have, where their bodies show signs of arousal while something traumatic is happening. That immediately can cause, I can't trust my body because I should have shut down, or I should have not, it should have not felt good. I shouldn't have reacted that way, right? Race and class, the lower we are in the class caste system stratification, the less education is available to us. Um the less we're able to read these complex studies that we can like extrapolate and extract information that's relevant to us. Um And then further than that, those of us who are racialized and those of us who come from lower classes who are able to achieve college education to be able to gain the ability to read articles and be able to access higher dimensions of learning, that comes at a cost. It's not like we're just going to college and it's easy, right? Like there's multiple hurdles that we need to achieve, that we need to like traverse to be able to then gain that knowledge. It's akin to like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. Um, and so I will also say that body literacy in pregnancy and the postpartum and being able to interpret the signals in the body correctly also is impacted by how well you understand what's being told to you about the changes in pregnancy, about your changes in the postpartum. You can tell somebody, hey, like your abdominal muscles have split open. And for some of us, that registers immediately because we have knowledge of the physiology. And for some people, they might be like, oh, but like I could heal that up really fast. Or like, I don't know what you mean or what you're talking about. Like, if you ask folks who do not have body literacy, or excuse me, not body literacy, health literacy or knowledge of the body, they might not be able to tell you where all of their organs are, let alone what's going on in the reproductive system. And so I want to just point that out as really important. Like it's one thing to know the signals and the symptoms. It's another to be able to like compare that experience to like objective scientific research so that you can properly identify what's going on in your body. Um so the impact of not being able to read the signals and have this information makes people more vulnerable to postpartum depression, peripartum depression, perinatal depression, all the depressions that occur in that period of time. Because again, it goes that deep, that distrust and inability to understand the body then impacts our mind. And when our mind cannot trust our body, there's then a disassociation. There was a study that found that how pregnant individuals experience their bodies correlate with anxiety levels and depression, and also how confident they feel about feeding their babies and also taking care of their babies. So if the pregnant person, the postpartum person, does not feel that they can take care of themselves adequately, or that the pregnancy happened to them and that they were a passive observer or a passive participant in their journey, especially being in the hospital setting where like you're managed instead of being the center of the experience, that can then make you doubt, can I be a good parent? Can I be a good mother? Right? Like, can I can I do this? Can I do any of this at all? Um, so I found it interesting, and I'll tell my story in a minute about myself, and get out of like the macro and go to the micro, that the amount of trust that I have in myself has buffered some of the difficulty of that's inherent to being a mom. Um, and so I'm actually gonna just go over this chart really quick and then talk about my own story, because I really want to tell you my story and how am I applying and integrating all the stuff that I'm telling you. So this is actually from one of the papers that I read, and it's called the Multidimensional Assessment of Interconceptive Awareness. And so this can even be true for yourself, even if you're not pregnant, if you want to be pregnant, if you are postpartum, of being able to have some type of system for yourself of how do I want to develop the awareness of my signals. So there's noticing, so how much you're aware of your sensations of your body, from like the easiest things such as breathing to like the feelings in your uterus. Not distracting, so like where are you on the scale of not ignoring or distracting yourself from the sensation of pain or discomfort in the body. And like I had mentioned before, being able to sit with discomfort in the body is very important to your awareness, because to be able to pay attention to pain as a signal that you need to get some higher level of care, you need to pay attention, can lead to some catastrophic outcomes. There's not worrying, which is the tendency to not experience emotional distress with pain or discomfort from the body. Some of us have been socialized to freak out about a body sensation, and that then interrupts our awareness of our body signals and prevents us from being able to access our own wisdom. There's attention regulation, the ability to sustain and control attention to our body sensations. How long can we pay attention to our body? Emotional awareness, so the awareness of the connection between body signals and emotional states. For those of us that are doing just for basic fertility awareness in the menstrual cycle, I know that I notice very distinct changes when I'm in the follicular phase, ovulatory phase, luteal phase, and menstrual phase, as they connect to my mental health and as they connect to how I am moving through my emotional body. There's self-regulation, your ability to regulate your psychological stress by the attention that you give to your bodily symptoms and sensations. Body listening, which is the tendency to actively listen to your body for insight. This is something that can be challenging, because it's like, how do I listen to the body? Like, the body doesn't have a voice. The body does communicate with us, right? And so where are we on that scale, right? And then there's trusting, so the experience of being able to see your body as safe and trustworthy. And this actually reminded me of a conversation I had, or a conversation I had with Nicole, and something that you said in one of your presentations. It was like passing, like you said it in passing as you moved on to the next slide, and you were like, ovulation happens when it's safe enough to do so in the body. And on a biological level, like hormonally, that made sense. Like, oh yeah, like if the conditions are safe enough, if you have enough like protein and iron, and like those things are like then becoming the food items that are feeding the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Yeah, like there has to be safety in the body. But then I took it a step further with my own reproductive journey. I was like, how safe do I feel in my body for ovulation to happen? And that blew me away. And so when I came across this on this assessment scale, I was like, oh, you have to that there's a correlation between how much you're clenching your body, how much you're clenching your uterus, like what are the signals that you're sending. That then also like was something that I have told folks when they're in labor and when they're pregnant, but particularly in childbirth, is that animals, if you observe a mammal, mammals will not give birth until they're safe. If they're in danger, if they're running away from a predator, if they're being preyed on, they will literally, their body will shut down the show. So when a woman or a pregnant person is in labor, if they feel unsafe and they cannot relax their body to let the baby out of their body, not always, because I don't want to generalize, this can prevent and can stall and halt the labor, which I have seen happen. Um, and so this body trust for anyone that wants to give birth, to cultivate it can be a journey, it can be a challenge, but is of the utmost importance. So I'm gonna take the last part of this to talk about myself as a case study for body literacy and the postpartum and the pregnancy journey. So I have two girls, two babies, and I got pregnant in 2017 with my first daughter. And I didn't know what I didn't know about my body at that time. I didn't know when I conceived. I had like a vague knowledge of when I conceived because I was still irregular. But I was completely disconnected from my body. I had always thought I was in my body, but being pregnant with my first daughter showed me just extreme how disconnected I was. And I had a lot of doubt about my body. I didn't trust my body as much as I thought I did. And I realized that after I gave birth, I was living up here. I can't even tell you or recount to you memories of sensations in my body when I was pregnant. I knew that there was some trauma that I had there. Um I have had the experience of being violated, and that was at the top of my mind. And I mentioned it to my midwives in passing, but at every appointment, I basically like shielded myself. Like I was like, I'm a midwife, so I know what's happening. Like, yeah, I'm fine, or yeah, I'm good. Oh, I need to take iron supplements. Okay, cool. I knew everything to eat. I ate enough protein. I ate enough meat, enough vegetables. I had all of that down pat because I was looking at my body and treating my body as I was midwifing my body. I wasn't in the pregnancy. And all of that disconnection and disassociating from my body came to a head when I went into labor. I had my first baby at the end of April, and it just so happens that the end of April is also the birthday of the person that violated me. And that was at the front of my mind. That was at the front of my mind the whole time I was in labor. The date. I was looking at the date on my phone as I was like contracting. Like I know what date it is. Had to know every single moment that I had my phone in front of me what date it was. And I spent 4 days in labor, on and off contractions. And I was supposed to have a home birth, and then I ended up having my mother there, which went against my internal wisdom of having my mom there. Um, no one could reach me. I felt like I was all alone, all by myself. I ended up transferring to the hospital, and I ended up getting an epidural because the sensation in my legs, every time I had a contraction, my legs would burn. I eventually did end up giving birth vaginally. And I remember that at 3 weeks postpartum, I was up on a stage giving a presentation with my baby strapped to me. I should have been in bed. But as I reflected on my journey in time that went on between my first baby and my second baby, I then went through an interconception, fertility awareness, and body literacy journey where I had to grapple and come to terms with how deeply disconnected I was from my body. I had to deep dive. I had to like dig deep. I had to go to therapy. I had to tell my midwives like you weren't really there for me, but you weren't there for me because I didn't let you be there for me. I didn't let you take care of me. Um, I had to remember my own wisdom because I had started to depend on other people's experience of my birth and of my pregnancy and of my body instead of my own. I remember when I was wanting to get pregnant with my first daughter, I actually like a gynecologist that like works for people with IVF, and I was on metformin and all of these things until there came a moment where I was like, wait a minute, like I know this. And I had to really like reconcile like why was I not trusting my body? It was funny because before I got pregnant, I actually took shrooms like months and months before that. And that trip that I had, what came up and what was like I had to integrate was this fear of my body. And then I became pregnant and I didn't get it until I got it. During this interconception period, that was about like 3 years after I gave birth. That's when I met Nicole. That's when I started to do fertility awareness, which came in handy right when I met her because I was charting my temperatures and I was charting my symptoms. And I wasn't planning to get pregnant. But I remember that it was end of April, beginning of May, somewhere around there. And I was charting my temperatures. And I remember that Nicole had told me, like, if you have a temperature rise of about 18 days, it's probably a possible pregnancy. So I text her on like the 18th, 19th day. I'm like, are these temperatures not going down? And she's like, no, friend, they're not. And so I knew the day that I got pregnant and I knew when I was pregnant. There was a sureness because I had developed this trust in my body from from having studied my body, from the fertility awareness method, and the reconciling that I was doing on a mental and emotional level. I had such a great sense of what was going on in my body, and it was ever growing that I trusted this. And this is the reason why I tell Nicole that that baby's her baby. And she's the first person that knew that I was pregnant because she's the one that confirmed pregnancy for me. To the point that even though I told the midwives that I chose this time around that I was pregnant, and I had an irregular cycle, they were like, "You should get an ultrasound." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure that this is when this is when I got pregnant, and this is my due date, and this is my conception. This is when I conceived." And they still made me get the ultrasound just because it's protocol. And like the date that the ultrasound gave was not the date that me and Nicole had come up with. And I was like, I want this date. I don't care what the ultrasound said. This is the date. But that confidence came with the deep trust that I had developed in my body and on the signals that I had learned how to read. There were a lot of shifts that happened. The minute that I got pregnant, my marriage began to fall apart. Spoke to the doula that I had the first time around and told her in the ways that she had failed me. I told my mom that she wasn't going to be at the labor. Like it was, my my ex, my co-parent, he would roll his eyes because I'd be like, this is my truth telling baby. Because of how sure and in my body I was becoming, I could not stop the truth from coming out of my mouth to anyone. So I organized a very conscious birth team. I picked an entirely different birth team. I didn't have the father of my children at my birth. I I created a space where my birth team deeply listened to me. I told them like, hey, when I'm in labor, I need you to give me very direct commands. If you see me checking out, I need you to call me back. I, in my first pregnancy, I was very stationary. And I was very sedentary. I didn't move a lot. In my second pregnancy, I was I was taking belly dance, I was doing yoga, I was in therapy, but this time around with a consciousness of I need to talk about what happened and I don't want my trauma to stop me this time. So we need to talk about this. As I was approaching the end of my pregnancy, and I'm watching the time because I want to make sure y'all go on to your next presentation. As I was getting ready to give birth, and I'm talking about 36 weeks of pregnancy, there's this thing called lightning crotch. I don't know why we call it lightning crotch midwives, but lightning crotch is the sensation of the baby's head pressing on your cervix and the symptoms and the feelings that happen. Some people actually like push away from it, right? But because I was like, I wanted so badly to have a different birth and a different experience, that I was like, I need to sit in it. So I would actually press my body into the sensation. I would let myself feel the discomfort that was happening in my uterus. I would let myself really close my eyes and feel the baby burrowing into my cervix and burying into my pelvis. I was meditative almost. Like I went into like labor land mentally really, really fast because I was so in my body and I was so trusting that like I could do this. With there were some fears still that I was gonna have the same experience as my first birth. Um but I persisted on. And at 36 weeks, and there's actually research if you want to go on I think evidence-based birth. They have a study on dates, actual dates that you eat. Dates can help to like ripen the cervix and start to soften the cervix. So I was like clockwork. I had dates in a smoothie every single day. I had a massage. I had a prenatal massage. The whole nine. I was in it. But it wasn't like a intellectual being in it. It was like a my body needs this for me to be where I need to be. So I did all of that. And another difference from my first labor experience to my second labor experience is I had a lot of cervical checks when I was in my first labor experience. And because I wasn't sure, because I didn't know. I didn't trust my body to open up. I didn't trust that I could give birth the first time around. The second time around, the only person that touched my cervix was me. I was the only person that did a cervical check. And so I also charted and kept note of every time that I would check my cervix while having the dates in my system to feel my cervix softening. So I actually didn't wait until I was in labor to know that I was in labor. I knew my body was getting ready day by day by touching my cervix, which to the point of body literacy, why I feel that checking your cervix and becoming more comfortable with checking your cervix, I know that's not available to everyone for various reasons, really can really like give you so much agency when you're giving birth, because you can be the one to tell folks, I know what's happening. I know what's happening because I feel it. So on the due date that me and Nicole chose, or rather the one that we observed, because we didn't choose it, the charting told us. On that day, I got a chiropractic adjustment. The reason that I got a chiropractic adjustment is because in the interconception preparation part of my journey, I went to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor was able to give me valuable information about my body structure. That my hips were actually, for a very long time, twisted like a Mobius strip, and that I was walking around like this, which means that my first child had to traverse a tilted and like twisted pelvis, so for that I wasn't aware of until I started to feel it in the postpartum. um and that's what she was also navigating for those 4 days that I was in labor. So I got a chiropractic adjustment. As soon as I got home from that chiropractic adjustment, I laid down. It was January, so I got laid down. I got cozy under the blankets. I started cramping, and about 24 hours later, I was in labor. That labor was different. I was more focused and more in my body. The contractions hurt, but they weren't like I wanted to leave my body. I stayed with it. I got in the shower and I called the mid. I was in touch with my midwives, and they were also focused on my body sensations and what I was communicating to them, rather than like how long it's been, how many hours it's been. They were like, "What are you feeling? How are you feeling? Like, do you feel like you need us to be there? Do you feel like you want to wait a little bit longer?" So there was so much more trust put in me also by my midwives. Not to say that with my first midwives, they didn't respect me and honor and love me, because they did. I believe that my midwives did the best that they could midwifing a midwife. For those of you who don't know, midwifing a midwife or a doula is actually harder than midwifing someone that is just coming into this with minimal knowledge, because they want to midwife themselves and they're headstrong. right? So I give my first team of midwives that grace. I let my midwives in my second pregnancy midwife me. And so to wrap up my birth story with my second daughter, um, the next day I was in full blown labor. My doula came over, and they called the midwives to see if it was time to go. As they were calling them, I was already putting my clothes on. I didn't even wait for the midwives to tell me. I was like, it's time to go. Like, and so we got dressed. We drove over to New Jersey because I wanted to give birth a completely different environment mentally. So I gave birth at a birth center, and they call me and they're like, they're all bubbly because of course they've had 8 hours of sleep. So they're like bushy tail and bright eyed. They're like, hi, we just want to know what room you want to be in. And of course, I'm like through gritted teeth having full blown contractions in the back seat. My daughter's sleeping next to me. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Please just turn the water on. Turn the water on for as hot as I can be in it. The reason being is that I started having some pain in my legs. And this is where the fear started to creep in. I was afraid I was going to have the same experience. So when I get to the birth center, I my midwife, who's all of like 5'3", 5'2", shorter than me, she receives me at the door. I get out. I don't even know how I moved out of the car so fast, being that pregnant and being in full blown labor. And she receives me at the door and she holds her arms out to me. And I remember, and I've never felt this again before in my life, nor had I ever felt it in my life. I let her hold me. I let her hold all 160 something pounds on this small little woman, small little Jewish woman. Like, she just held me and I relaxed and I let go. I get into the room. I don't know. It was almost like, I don't know how many of y'all have seen Bruce Almighty. So I'm dating myself, but like in one fell swoop, all my clothes were off, and I got right into the bathtub. Now I have to tell you, as a midwife, I'm not a huge fan of water births. Not because I don't think that water is a good ally for pregnant people in labor, just the messiness of it. So I got in the water, and I start I start moaning, I started like emoting, I start moving around, and I'm in it. They leave me completely alone. They're just guarding the space and holding the space for me. And I checked myself and I thought I was not dilating. And so I went into fear and frustration, and I connected to this primordial energy in my body. And I remember banging on the bathtub. I'm pretty sure they heard it outside. I was banging as hard as I could on the bathtub. I'm like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And it was like what I've later found out could be called a primal scream, that I let myself be that raw and that primal. I've never screamed like that in my life. And then shortly after that, I went into what's called rest and be thankful. The rest and be thankful, what we call, is like those few minutes or like hour that like after you actually go through transition, which is what I was going through. I didn't know. I thought I had hours to go because I was like, I'm not dilating. I don't want to do this. I went. I laid on my side and I napped. I just literally just passed out, just in the water. And I remember coming back and being in my body, fully in my body, and I put my hand on my vulva and I felt my baby's head. And the position I was squatting with like my vulva on the the floor of the bathtub, and my midwife really subtly was like, "Can you just move a little bit so that the baby doesn't crash into the head, into the bathtub bottom?" So I moved, and I I didn't know. I wouldn't even say I pushed. I just let my body do it, and I caught my baby's head. And on the next push, the rest of the baby's body came out. And unlike my first baby, the only thing I can remember from my first birth is the ring of fire and my baby's head coming out. With this baby, I remember feeling every part of their body coming out of my body. And then what ended up happening when that happened is that I came back into my body. If I thought I was in my body before, it was like a sensation of like, boom, I'm in my body. And so I'm showing you a couple pictures of this when you see me snoozing on the bathtub right here, literally that was me sleeping. And this picture that I'm showing you of this photo shoot I had was me being able to be in my body and also like lean into the discomfort, but also do what I needed. At that point in my life, what ended up happening is I gave birth to the baby. I was postpartum and I cocooned myself. I took those 6 weeks and I didn't do anything. The 3 weeks that I was presenting on a stage in my first pregnancy, hell no. I spent 6 weeks in my bed, and my doula team organized the food. I made sure to get a postpartum doula. I didn't do anything. I was in my bed. Then I developed a postpartum mood disorder. And really what happened is that being embodied and being so in my body allowed me to access all of these things that I didn't know about my mental health. I got diagnosed with postpartum OCD, which then I realized I actually had OCD for my whole life. That's a whole other topic. But what also happened is that all of the trauma that I didn't want to stop me from having the birth that I wanted came pouring out onto the page, like furiously rivering out. And that ended up becoming my third book that I ended up finishing and publishing in 2024, where I wrote everything out. Every memory, everything. What's interesting is that because I had been so in my body, I was able to feel and release all of the tension and the trauma from my body. I also was able to I had flashbacks happening throughout this time as well. And flashbacks can be a very like visceral body experience. I actually was able to, because I trusted my body, just let the flashbacks happen and be able to gain the wisdom from them. And so I was able to trust that my body was doing what it needed to do. And ever since then, my daughter's gonna be 4 years old next Friday. In the last 4 years, there's just been a complete commitment to herbal wisdom, to being even more aware of my menstrual cycles. I've started to like chart my postpartum menstrual symptoms and understand and have a deeper understanding of the luteal phase. I understood how deeply the luteal phase affects mental health because my therapist for my PMADs was like, people who have PMADs are deeply affected by the luteal cycle. And so now, as I'm facing and looking at perimenopause and menopause, I'm now going to be 41 years old this year. I have gained so much knowledge, not just from books, not just from talking to fertility awareness specialists, but from the medicine and the wisdom that I gained from my body, of being able to listen and trust my body. And so when I'm talking to all of you about the importance of body literacy, I'm not talking to y'all from a place of like lecturing at you and telling you to develop it. I'm coming to all of you and sharing these things from a place of deep disassociation, deep pain, and deeply disembodied to now this journey of embodiment in my postpartum. And not letting my intellect sever the connection that I have with my body. And so, thank you. I made it to 3 o'clock. I could talk so much more about everything, especially about the postpartum. Um, but I'm glad that I was able to share all of this with you all. A huge thank you to the fertility awareness community. I think that we have a lot to offer pregnant and postpartum people. And I think that, at least for myself, and I know there's another presenter in the symposium who's also postpartum and does a lot of postpartum work, like to push and to talk about body literacy as a lifespan journey, and not just like, let's just focus on like getting pregnant or preventing getting pregnant, but as a practice that is going to serve us throughout our life. I think we are on the precipice of amplifying what has been concentrated to just managing our menstrual cycles. Nicole, if you want to drop my social media information, specifically River Body Wellness, in the chat,
Yes.
best way to find me. You could also Google my name. I am very Googleable through all of the years that I've been in service to community. But I would be happy to talk to anyone who is thinking about getting pregnant or is postpartum, as a midwife, as somebody who's been through all of this. So that's all I got for you guys.
Does anyone have any questions for Carmen? Please, the floor is open if you just want to give her a shout.
I'm just looking at the chat. Okay.
Hi,
Go
my
ahead.
name's Shola. Thank you so much, Carmen, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. You shared reading a paper to help with the different measures of being more in touch with our bodies. Do you happen to know the name of that paper?
Actually, yes, I do. I have it open because I was reading it last night.
Thank
Let
you.
me see which one it is because there's a bunch of them. Oh, it's called Interconceptive Sensibility and Body Satisfaction in Pregnant and Non-Pregnant Women with and Without Children. So that's one of the, I'm going to drop it in the chat, the name of it. It is, let me see if it's open source because I was able to get it. I also have the PDF in case in case you hit a paywall.
Okay, so I could like reach out and get a copy of the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I talk about the midwifery model of care, both help and hinder your birth experiences. Yes, I can. So, like I was saying about my first birth versus my second birth. Um, as much grace as I gave my midwives, I also feel like there were some things that my midwives missed because of how much they trusted me being a midwife. So like towards the end of my pregnancy, my midwife realized that that she didn't take into account that I was irregular, which means that my due date was not accurate. So that was one thing that I could say. She also didn't give as much importance or didn't really take into account that I had told her that I had trauma history. Which, like I said, because of how I presented as like I know everything and I'm a midwife, I can understand, but I think that she could have midwifed me more. And then my transfer to the hospital. So the midwifery model of care in the hospital um isn't you're not able to actually fully practice it in the hospital setting, and you also become or are vulnerable to being an agent of the state. And why I say that is because um I realized that I had more agency in the hospital because I identified myself as a midwife. Because if I had not told them that I was a midwife, they probably would have just followed whatever protocol they were going to do. They even asked me if I wanted pitocin because I was bleeding more than I needed to. So I was able to give consent in a way that other people wouldn't have been able to give consent around getting pitocin. But I remember that I didn't want to get vitamin K for my first daughter. And the midwife who was at my birth's immediate response was, then we have to call CPS. We have to call Child Protective Services. And so I don't know if that answers your question, the hindering part, because both sets of midwives were as empathetic and compassionate as they could be. I got more empathy and more care from the midwives that were the home birth midwives. and again, like, I believe that you birth the way you live. So I know that I called those midwives into my life, right? But it was the hospital midwives where I could see, like, you're not able to actually practice the full scope of your midwifery care and be able to censor me because you still are in the hospital setting. I was, though, still grateful that I transferred into the care of midwives, because if I had to transfer into the care of OBGYNs, it might have been even different for me, especially as a Black woman. Conversely, with my second pregnancy, um, the because I chose a different team, and because um the midwife that the primary midwife that I chose um had different energy than my first primary midwife. She really practiced in a way that made me feel held, and she held space, and she made room for me to show up as a powerful individual who was a midwife, but she also was very much like, I'm in the driver's seat, respectfully, not in a controlling way, not in a taking away my agency, but she let me she I let her lead, because she showed me that she could lead and she could hold the space. And I think with the midwifery model of care, it's important to censor the person that's pregnant, but it's also important to hold the space for them, because I can personally attest to how easy it is if you walk in there like saying, I know everything, and all of that, that you can actually block actual care from getting to you. Um, and being able to let them do what they need to do. But I think that the midwifery model of care can only fully function in its full capacity outside of the hospital setting. And I also think it's important for us as individuals to, like, so saying that you birth the way that you live, like, we say this a lot as midwives, and what that means is that whatever you're carrying, however you build relationships, your boundaries or lack thereof, that's going to show up in the birth space. And so those two things became very present for me in both spaces as I look back on and think about my pregnancies and my labor experiences. It's like, yeah, I really did birth the way that I lived, because I was living a different way. And I was living a different way in my first pregnancy than I was living in my body in the second pregnancy. So I hope that answered your question, Afe.
Does anyone else have a question for Carmen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
This might be a bit, maybe slightly on a tangent, but I'm curious. Well, I guess before I take the question, thank you so much for the session. It was really illuminating. I'm just wondering how sort of building that connection to your body, how has that influenced, I guess, your connection to your intuition as well?
It's amplified it. Actually, it's amplified it because the body is the seat of intuition. The body is the seat of spirit. And so the deeper that I lean into my body sensations, the more my body communicates with me and the more I can hear my body. I feel that intuition is both like your ability to sense your inner feelings and subtle feelings, and also connection to spirit. And so, like I just said, like, because spirit lives in the body, opening the connections and the pathways of my body, and not being clenched, and not being tense, and not ignoring my body, has definitely facilitated me being more intuitive, because being able to sit with the body means I'm able to still my mind and hear all of the nudgings of spirit and nudgings of my body.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
Are there any sort of things that you would recommend, I guess, to do regularly? I've heard of meditation a lot, but I don't know if there's any other, I guess, tips or anything that you have. I'm quite young and not really looking to get pregnant anytime soon, but just building that connection with my body through dance and other things, I found to be beneficial.
Um, I will say that there's a couple of different ways. So meditation, dance, exercise, exploring your own body, to put it frankly, being able to like examine yourself, touch your vulva, touch your cervix, and like learn like the inner workings of your own like vagina and that space in general. Being sensual with the body, so like adorning the body, taking baths, being in the shower even, and like instead of just going in the shower just to scrub yourself, like being in the shower and actually touching your body. Emoting, like, so if you feel like emotions coming up, letting the full extent and the full breadth of your emotions to ripple throughout your body, is has been really important in me, like being more in touch with and trusting my body. um Nourishing my body, eating well, eating warm foods, and being warm and staying warm. Like the colder my body is, the less I can feel my body, just like on a physiological level. So I always keep my home really, really warm. I'm like, energy bill be damned at this point. Like I really need to be warm. Um, I'm always wearing socks in the house, like when it's cold, you know. So just those things of like the body understanding and feeling it, you take care of it, will have the body respond to you in a way that's really that's really synergistic or symbiotic, if you will. I'll also say like paying attention to what we say about ourselves in our body. And so I understand that people have menstrual cycles that are uncomfortable, painful, debilitating, even. Like, I don't take that away from folks, and that's not been my experience. And I have a lot of empathy. And like, I also think it's important that we are aware of how we talk to our bodies, even when those things are present for us. So like, not like minimizing the pain, right? But like, I sometimes wonder what's the impact of like telling ourselves repeatedly, oh, I hate my uterus, or like, I hate this, or I hate you, right? Like, those carry energy. So like, two things can be true at the same time of like, this is uncomfortable, this feels awful, I need help, right? And that pain actually being an indicator that you need to seek support, or you need to do what you need to do to feel good in the body. There's one thing around that versus I hate this, I hate myself, I hate my reproductive system, can also make a difference. And so when I started communicating to my body that I loved it, or that I was neutral, right, that it was just, I am here and we just are what we are, I noticed that there was a different, that my body responded differently, and that my body felt safe to um be inhabited by me. That was, my body felt safe in me inhabiting it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If there's anyone that's trying to follow me, I suggest on Instagram, I suggest following me on River Body Wellness, just because I do have a private account. So I'm like, I don't always let folks that I don't know personally follow me, unless you send me a private message and you're like, hey, you know, I was at your workshop. Oh no, you're fine, Nicole. That's fine. People would have found out anyway. They're like, oh, she's not letting me follow her. But I'm River Body Wellness. I will definitely let you follow.